Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. Today we're going to be taking a look at what some have called that other pendulum deck. With magicians currently dominating the pendulum scene, it can be hard to remember that there's a completely different deck that is similarly viable. With the ban list looming, it's time for us to take a look at the deck that might soon be the feature of several thousand angry Reddit posts, Zefra. So here's the list, and if you've seen Zefra lists in the past, you might be scratching your head a little bit at this one. Don't worry, that's natural, and I'll explain why I'm playing the cards I'm playing in a second. As always, I'll give you a little bit of background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and as always, the card by card. So firstly, for those of you that don't know, Zefra is a weird category of monsters. Lore-wise, they've got some relation to the dual terminal storyline that you can look up if you're really into reading several paragraphs of writing on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki by the genius who brought us Master Pendulum's flavor text. Gameplay-wise, they've previously functioned as individual support cards for their associated archetypes. Zefra Wendy and Zefra Empilica snuck into Ritual Beast builds, Zefra Nui was a giant boon to Yang Xing, etc. As support for generic pendulum strategies has blossomed, however, they're now having success as their own fully fledged archetype. Add Zefrath, one of the most powerful pendulum tools ever printed, to the mix, and you've got a consistent toolboxy pendulum deck with the ability to search multiple negates per turn. What makes Zefra particularly alluring is that should the upcoming ban list hit Astrograph or Chronograph, this deck is likely to become the dominant pendulum strategy. The deck we're playing today aims to take advantage of every single tool Zefras are afforded. We're playing the Magicians, yes, but not to make Absolute Dragon every turn one. It's to get pendulum material for Electromite on our side of the board without wasting our normal summon. The deck is incredibly combo-oriented, and different hands play out in massively different ways. We've got about a 75% chance to Uninterrupted end on a Golems and a Cloud Castle overlaid under a true King of All Calamities with an Electromite on top. Based on our draws or how our opponent interacts, we could also end with a usable Mythical Beast, a guaranteed Ghost Ogre in hand, several negation spells between Zefra Divine Strike, 9 Pillars, and Zefra War, or Chow Fang and Friends. It's 45 cards, but that doesn't matter too much with our ridiculous amount of searchers, and it keeps the deck fat for turns 2 and beyond. The flexibility of this strategy means that we're able to both flex the relevant portions of our deck across tons of different matchups, which is great news, especially in a format as diverse as this one, as well as blank highly targeted sideboard strategies by varying our own game plan from game to game. Basically what I'm saying is, you have to have at least an IQ of 300 to play this deck, and yes, I do have a Zefra tattoo, but it's for the ladies' eyes only. So with that, let's get into the card by card. We're playing 3 copies of Astrograph and 3 copies of Chronograph. I will warn you that Zefra decks usually either pick Odd Eyes Synchron or the Magicians, but we're aiming to get the best of both worlds. 1 Destrudo for additional shrine targets should we draw Darkworm, 1 Ghost Ogre who we can put on top of our deck with Oracle of Zefra and draw with Stardust Charge Warrior, 1 Mythical Beast King Jackal, and 3 Mythical Beast King Xyz material. 1 Odd Eyes Synchron who is critical for any of our Golems into Calamities combos, then a heap of 1-ofs for Zefrath. 1 Zefra Wendy, both Teller Zefra, 1 Time Gazer for Chronograph, and 1 Stargazer for Astrograph, or vice versa. After that is Darkworm and his best buddy Zero, followed by 3 copies of Zefrath, 2 copies of Zefra Nui, and 2 Zefraxi. There would be 3 in an ideal world, but then we'd be playing 47 cards, and I feel dirty enough already. After that, we've got 1 copy of Ravine, 2 copies of Shrine, 1 copy of Foolish, 1 Set Rotation, 3 Oracle of Zefra, 3 Terraforming, 3 Zefra Providence, and then our negation 1-ofs. Zefra Divine Strike, Zefra War, and 9 Pillars, may dang long rest in peace. In the extra, we've got Vortex Dragon. What? I want to live the dream. 1 copy of Golems, 1 Cloud Castle, 1 Chow Fang, 1 Baxio, 1 Stardust Charge, 1 AFD, 1 M7, 1 Absolute Dragon, 1 TK Calamities, 1 Borreload, 2 Electromite, 1 Metaltron, and an Underclock Taker. And with that, let's jump into the games. Because we already know that Zefra is at the very least decent, we're going to start a little further up on the tier list than we usually do. Don't worry, I'm sure you will get to see me kick in a Cybers player's teeth in the near future. Our opponent is on Paleozoic Frogs, which is great news for us because we are going first, and this is one of the few decks in the format that plays very few hand traps. We're going to start by activating this copy of Foolish Burial. We send a copy of Darkworm to graveyard, and we'll get him back along with a 0 to our hand. Afterwards, we're going to use the effect of Chronograph Sorcerer to destroy itself and get a Time Gazer from deck, and look at that, it's an Electromite without our normal summon. We'll set an Odd Eyes Synchron to our top of extra deck, then get ourselves a Jackal as well, special summoning a copy of Astrograph off the self-destruct and getting a second copy of Chronograph. A great scale because it doesn't restrict you to Zefras, but we draw an Oracle off the top of our deck, and there's Zefrath. We're going to Pendulum Summon 4, probably a little bit greedy. Afterwards, we're going to use Zefra Nui's effect to get a Providence, so our Jackal is on. Then we'll go into an M7 and a Chow Fang, but unfortunately the Chow Fang doesn't have anything attached. Our opponent's going to start by activating the effect of Swap Frog. We'll go ahead and negate that with the Jackal. That's really good news for us. Afterwards, Afterwards, they'll fire off a Regeki, which we can negate with a Divine Strike, and hopefully that's all they can do. It looks like it is. They can make one totally awesome, but I think we can beat that pretty easily. They're going to set 2, then attack over our Electromite and pass it back to us. In the standby, they're going to get themselves a copy of Dupe Frog, which is not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. In main phase 1, we're going to activate Tolmi M7, so we bait out the Toad activation. They will take Tolmi, but it's not a big deal because we have several monsters with over 2,000 attack. They'll add a Swap Frog back to hand. We'll set a Chronograph Sorcerer. They'll chain Oleonades to Zefrath's activation, but we have a Providence in Graveyard. Then we will Pendulum Summon 0, go into Absolute Dragon, triggering the Solemn Judgment, and from this point on, it's just attacking over monsters. They get a second Swap Frog, and we get our Tolmi off the board with 1 card set. Now we know 2 of the cards in their hand are Swap Frog. Hopefully by stopping one of them with the Mythical Beast King Jackal, we can prevent them from getting the other, and what do you know, we can. They're just going to make Ronin Totems, set 1, and pass. We'll destroy that set card at the end of the turn. They're going to chain a Paleozoic for a blocker, but it should be enough. We're going to go ahead and use the effect of Zefrath so that it is a relevant scale, then Pendulum Summon 2 cards, go into an Electromite again. My lord, this is just ridiculous. Adding a copy of Astrograph so we can special summon it when it's returned to our hand, and from here on out the game is just completely over. We're going to go ahead and activate this copy of Zefra Providence and then set another scale just to add insult to injury after getting in for lethal. One of the most compelling reasons to play Zefra is its incredible ability to adapt its game plan. You can see for game 2 our opponent is playing True King Dino, a deck that aims to go second, and as a result, plays hand traps. They've drawn one such hand trap, Effect Veiler. Let's see how effectively we can play around it. We'll start by testing for Ash Blossom with this copy of Mythical Beast Master Cerberus. We don't see it upon adding the Jackal to hand, so here comes the Shrine and the Dark Worm. That's going to add a 0 to our hand. We'll set this Zefrath and send a copy of Zefra Nui, normal summon a Zefraxi to go into Electromite, and here's the Effect Veiler, one of the most efficient answers to this card in the format. We'll set a 0 and Pendulum 4, which is still pretty strong, one of which is the Master Jackal. We're going to go ahead and set up a 9-star Synchro with our copy of Zefraxi and add a copy of Divine Strike with our Zefra Nui, and then pass it back to our opponent. They're going to start by activating the effect of Soul Eating Overraptor. We will go ahead and negate that with Zefra Divine Strike. Afterwards, they're going to activate the effect of Ultra Evolution to get out Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. That puts 2 spell counters on Jackal, which we will remove when they activate the effect of Tyranno. They'll pass it back to us, and this is the end of the game, especially after drawing a Terraforming. We will use that to get an Oracle of Zefra, fire off that sucker to get ourselves an attacking monster, then go into a Zefra Metaltron, Pendulum 2, one of which has 19 attack and 118 for well over lethal. Alright, so it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent is playing Trickstar, which is very bad news for us. This deck routinely assembles hands of 2+ hand traps, and our opponent has done just that. Thankfully, the rest of their hand is pretty bad. They don't have much of a follow-up. Let's see how far we can make this go. We're going to start by testing for as much as possible with this Cerberus, and test successful. There's Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Afterwards, we're going to activate Terraforming, which prompts a Draw and Lock Bird, so I guess we'll just set a set rotation and hope for the best. Our opponent normal summons a Licorica, then attacks us for 16, sets 2, and passes back, as I breathe a sigh of relief. We're going to go ahead and set as much as possible, not trying to get Droll locked out of this game, then activate Oracle of Zephyr for Zefrath, which of course prompts the Trickstar reincarnation. Now we draw into something particularly relevant, Dragon's Ravine. We can go ahead and send a copy of Darkworm, then special summon him. He doesn't get 0, but he does attack over Licorica. We're going to get a second copy of Zefrath, then send a Zefra Nui to the top of our extra deck, which we will immediately summon for a copy of 9 Pillars. Things are looking okay. We're going to go ahead and attack over the Licorice, set 1 negation spell, and there's the ever-present threat in Trickstar, end phase Scapegoat. So we're going to have to contend with at least one Borreload Dragon. Our opponent draws into a Pot of Desires, must be nice, then goes into a Mrs. Radiant, a Link Spider, and a Borreload Dragon. Afterwards, they're going to attack into our Zefra Nui and foolishly use the effect. We'll send that sucker right back to the extra deck, then get ourselves a Zefra Providence from deck. They're going to set one more card, another Scapegoat. We draw into a Zefrath. We're going to go ahead and use Zefra Providence for Zefraxi, go into Electromite, and please, can we resolve something this game? My god. Well, thankfully, we can still go ahead and Pendulum Summon. We'll get ourselves the Zefra Nui one more time, getting a Zefra Divine Strike and passing it back. There's the second Scapegoat, but thankfully my opponent is out of material necessary to make Borreload. They can still go into Firewall Dragon, but with only 2,500 attack points and can't get over Zefra Nui. That's what the Eater of Millions is for, but of course we have one piece of negation. We will Divine Strike that sucker, and they will pass back to us. Things are looking up, provided we do anything at all. We draw into a Jackal, which should be enough. We're going to go ahead and use Ravine to send a copy of Destrudo, then bring it back, sending of course a Zefrath to do so, because it's particularly meaningless when we already have one in our Pendulum Zone. We'll go ahead and use the effect of Ancient Fairy Dragon to get an Oracle of Zephyr to our hand, adding a Shadow Zephyr to our hand, then Pendulum summoning 1, 2, 3 in the extra monster zone given to us by Firewall Dragon. we get a Zefra Providence off of the Zefra Nui, so we can trigger Jackal's effect. Then we go into Zefra Metaltron, attack into the Firewall Dragon. Of course, we can banish our own Zefra Providence instead of our monster being destroyed, and then pass it back to our opponent. They set one card, fearing the Scapegoat for the third time. I Zefra wore it, but thankfully it is just a Trickstar reincarnation, and we are now safe to win the game. We're going to go ahead and Pendulum Summon as many monsters as possible, add a copy of Zefraxi back to our hand, then get in for way over lethal. Rather than use Trickstar reincarnation, our opponent elects to just concede. So for game 2, our opponent is going first, which is not ideal, but more importantly, could you assemble a more broken Trickstar hand against a deck that plays 0 hand traps than this one? Well, our opponent's going to start by normal summoning this copy of Candina, getting themselves a copy of Light Stage, then activating Light Stage for Licorice to hand, setting one and passing it back. Now, this looks suspiciously like a Droll and Lock loop, so I'm going to do all I can to play around it, using this copy of Satellar Knight Zefraxiton to bait out an early activation of this set card. Unfortunately, the set card is Scapegoat. It is not Trickstar Reincarnation. So we're now going to have to contend with a whole bunch of tokens alongside the Trickstar Candina. We've set a Master Cerberus in our Pendulum Monster Zone, which means we should be able to get a Jackal to hand, but here comes the Ghost Ogre for the second game in a row. Thankfully, our copy of Time Gazer protects it, and we are able to get a Jackal to our hand. Our heavy metal foe's Electromite gets Veilered, unfortunately, but thankfully I think we still can make a reasonable Pendulum play. We're going to use what tools we can in order to Pendulum Summon a Zefra Nui, but of course we are still under Droll and Lock Bird. It's going to be nothing more than a defense position monster right now. Our opponent draws another Droll and Lock, then they're going to target our set card with their copy of Light Stage, go into a Decode Talker, then return this copy of Candina to the hand, so the Decode Talker goes well above the 2600 necessary to attack over our Zefra Nui. We're going to get ourselves a Zefra Providence, then take a whole bunch of damage as our opponent rams into this Electromite and rams us directly with his copy of Licoricica. Now, this hand is still pretty good in a world where our opponent doesn't rip a Droll and Lock Bird off the top of their deck, but unfortunately they've done just that, and after this Zefra Providence resolves, well, there's the Droll and Lock. We're going to set this Zefra Nui in our extra monster zone and then set one card just so we don't die, but this other Light Stage guarantees we do. Well, it's time for that all-important Game 3, and oh my god, they've opened Droll and Lock Ghost Ogre again! Well, thankfully, I think this hand can actually play through it. We'll start by activating the effect of Chronograph Sorcerer to destroy itself. Our opponent will chain Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and after the destruction is done, we'll go ahead and special summon an Astrograph Sorcerer, getting another Chronograph to our hand. We'll normal summon Zefra Core to go into Electromite, then send another Astrograph to the top of our extra deck, then Pendulum Summon both of them, go into Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon, and just do the Magician play, ending on Vortex? Huh, that seems pretty good. Our opponent, unfortunately, has 4 really good cards in their hand. They're going to start by activating Terraforming for a Light Stage, then Pot of Desires. They'll activate Light Stage to Candina. I'll go ahead and negate that sucker. Of course, they have a Licorice in hand at this point. They're going to go ahead and port out, but stopping the activation of Candina is still pretty important. Afterwards, unfortunately, they do have a Regeki. We can activate the effect of Chronograph Sorcerer so we don't take damage, but still pretty painful. We draw into a Zefrath, which is really good news because we can pop this Chronograph Sorcerer at any time to get a copy of Time Gazer from our deck. We're going to go ahead and set this Zefrath, sending a copy of Zefra Nui, then activate the effect of Zefra Providence to get an Oracle of Zefra, which will get us a Zefraxi, and things are actually looking pretty good for us. We're going to go ahead and go into an Electromite, send a copy of Perform Pal Odd Eyes Synchron to our hand, then take a whole bunch of damage and Pendulum Summon as many monsters as humanly possible. We should be able to get a couple of negates off this, as well as a rank 9. I'm going to go into Gothams because I really want to hit that Candina or that Light Stage. Either hit is really excellent. We're going to go ahead and attack for 3,100, 2,000, and 200 points of damage, just a little bit off lethal. We'll go ahead and use Gothams and then go into Borreload Dragon, setting a negation spell. And there's Scapegoat. There were ways we could have played safer, but Scapegoat. Well, what's the best out to Borreload Dragon? Here's a surprise. It's Borreload Dragon. And after they lock our set card, there's nothing we can do about losing here. We're going to go ahead and take 3,000 damage from our own Borreload Dragon, chain its effect, of course, to take slightly less from the Lilybell, but with a Licorice Engrave, it is just enough. They're going to go ahead and hit us for 3k, use Licorice to return the Lilybell to hand, special to Lily, and we'll concede. So we're back with the deck. God, that was painful. Those games were like walking on shards of glass, except every shard was a set Scapegoat. I've kind of lost control of this analogy. I really like this deck. As of now, the Astrograph stuff is nice. I mean, it's cool to occasionally make Vortex, but if Astrograph gets the hammer, well, I mean, we have tons of other ways to special summon individual Pendulum monsters. This deck feels very flexible. It's punishing against opponents who don't play hand traps and resilient against those who do. Just don't get Droll and Locked 3 games in a row, and I'm sure you'll be fine. So that's that. I anxiously await hordes of you standing for different builds of the deck, and truthfully, it's flexible enough that you're probably all right. If you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/monobluetron every Tuesday and Thursday from noon to 1 Eastern Standard Time, and if you want to see me play a certain deck or archetype on a future episode of this show, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best. Otherwise, I'll see you Wednesday.